Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first Boston Food Access Council public meeting of the new year. I recognize that it is March and it somehow feels like we've been in 2021 for far longer than 60 days or so, but here we are. I'm excited to kick off the meeting here tonight. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lauren Palumbo. My preferred pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a co-chair of the steering committee alongside Annalise Shepard and serving alongside 6 other folks on the steering committee who we will introduce shortly. Excited to welcome everyone here tonight. We are recording, so just so that everyone is aware. And I am just going to kick off the meeting by running through some really exciting rules and best practices, and then we'll introduce the steering committee and I will turn it over to a colleague of mine to kick off the agenda for the evening. So as I said, my name is Lauren. We will, throughout the evening, be dropping information into the chat. The first of those things will be an attendance form. We greatly appreciate it if everyone in attendance can fill that out at some point during the meeting. So we'll continue to remind you throughout the evening. That just helps us understand who is here in the virtual room and helps us understand who is an active member of BFAC. For introductions, because we have a packed agenda this evening and there are a number of us here that would take far too long to introduce us all directly. Please go ahead and add your name, your organization, if that's applicable, your preferred pronouns, and the neighborhood or community that you are representing this evening in the chat box. I will say publicly here, in addition to what I already shared about myself as a member of the steering committee, I am also representing the organization that I work for, which is Love and Spoonfuls. We are a food rescue organization, and I live in Jamaica Plain. As I mentioned, today's meeting will be recorded. We will be sharing a recording of the meeting out via email likely tomorrow, and it'll be available to watch on YouTube for folks that are interested. We do ask that everyone here please keep themselves muted at all times. Unless you are called on to speak. If you have questions, we encourage the use of the chat box, and we will try to leave time for Q&A to answer those questions at the end of each presentation. As I mentioned earlier as well, we'll also be using the chat box for sharing links and or other information throughout the evening, so please do engage there as well. We will have one set of breakout discussions later this evening, and we do encourage that everyone makes space for all voices in those groups to be heard. And then lastly, Elena, we do have Spanish translation available. You should see it. There's an interpretation button likely at the bottom of your screen, which you should be able to select. Elena, I don't know if you can hear this or if you're already on the Spanish channel. If you wanted to say anything. So I unfortunately cannot speak Spanish. So what I will just say is if you can understand this and you're interested in the Spanish translation, please go ahead and choose that from the options at the bottom of your screen. Oh, that's okay. Oh, fantastic. Thank you. We could not hear you. So if you want to say it again, that'd be great. No, I said it in English, so we'll just have you say it in Spanish. Okay.
Hey, Lauren, this is Catalina Lopez. Maybe I can make that announcement in Spanish if that's okay.
Oh, sure. That'd be great. Thank you.
Buenas noches, esa es Catalina López. Tenemos intérprete intérprete en español para esta reunión. Si desea tener este servicio, por favor vaya al botón que está en la parte inferior de la pantalla que dice Interpretation. Ahí ustedes conseguirán el servicio y alguien les hablará en español a medida que la reunión continúa. Okay, I think I think I passed the message at this point.
Fantastic. Thank you, Catalina. Okay. So as mentioned, this is our first meeting of the new year, and we are a new iteration of the steering committee here. For those of you who joined us for meetings throughout 2020, you'll remember that in December, we had some planned. We sort of have some folks cycle off the steering committee every year so that we get some new faces and some old faces each year. And we elected 4 new members to the steering committee in December. I will sort of name you all, and if you want to pop off mute and say hi, please do. I mentioned Annalise. She is our co-chair and representing the community here.
Hi, everyone. That's me. That's it.
We also have Marcos Belice, who I'm not sure if he's able to join this evening, also representing as a community member. We have Joy Gary, who's representing community.
Hi, everyone.
We have Catherine Drennan Lynn from the Greater Boston Food Bank, an organizational member.
Hi, everyone.
Megan Huang from About Fresh, also an organizational member.
Hey, everyone. Great to be here.
And finally, Maritza Rosario, also an organizational member from the Food Project.
Hey, everyone.
Thanks, team. And then the TBD on the 9th bullet point, we'll get to that shortly. So we'll have a new member joining us, hopefully as soon as next week. Also, we couldn't be here tonight if it wasn't without the efforts of our current intern, Megan Hoyne Wingate, who's here with us tonight and who keeps us on our toes and organized. So thank you, Megan. And with that, I am going to go ahead and turn the mic over to Annalise, who's going to share with y'all some information about our recently adopted value statement.
Hi, everybody. Yes, so we are using the values statement from the Equitable Boston Food Ecosystem Project, which some of you have probably attended those meetings, the Thursday 1 p.m. meetings. They had a really great session and adopted this value statement. So we sort of commandeered it and tailored it more to us. So the Boston Food Access Council brings together residents, activists, thought leaders, organizations, farmers, researchers, and other diverse stakeholders in order to address equitable food access in the city of Boston, recognizing its role in the larger Massachusetts food system. BFAC asserts that consistent access to healthy, nutritious, affordable, and culturally appropriate food is a basic human right. The BFAC seeks to create an anti-racist, inclusive, and participatory culture of learning by building trusting and transformational relationships within the community by engaging residents with lived experience and hunger. BFAC aims to ground itself in a power-sharing model that honors and values all voices at the table, treating each with dignity and respect, and is trauma-informed and self-critical. BFAC also seeks to offer a space to help provide an equitable, community-centered platform for food access, affordability, and, God, Claire, your chat box popped up, the last word, I think it says equity. Someone help me.
It says economic
opportunity.
Yeah.
That's it. It's okay, Claire. It's a little embarrassing for me. It's fine.
Thank you, Annalise. We did also just say that we shared this as well with working groups, and the steering committee was engaged as well in reviewing it. And we are excited to review all of our policies and decisions through the lens of this value statement going forward.
Thank you, Lauren. Yes.
Okay, so we sort of alluded to this a moment ago. So this evening we are going to review the plans for an additional steering committee election. As I mentioned, we did have an election back in December. Generally, the way that steering committee positions work, the terms are 2 years long. As I mentioned, we always have 4 or 5 seats turnover at the start of every year. So we will always have elections each December. Again, the intention there is to make sure that we are maintaining some folks with past experience on the steering committee while bringing in new members and continuing that overlap year over year. So traditionally, post-December, we would just sort of follow on and have an election the next December. But we did unfortunately have someone step off of the steering committee following the December elections. And so we do have an opening. So we are going to hold this special election this week. And this position will be for someone that's going to take their seat on the steering committee next week, and that position will be held through December 2022. So they will, whoever wins the election will hold the same term length as those who were just elected in December. So because we had the unexpected vacancy, fortunately, we did cover this when we created our bylaws around this time last year. And that stipulates that we will post the vacancy publicly, which we did via a few different email messages and social media messages out to our community earlier this year. We received 2 applications for the open position. And all members that have been participating in BFAC are eligible to vote to fill the vacancy. So in, I think, late February last week, we did send out a candidate overview of the 2 candidates that have applied. They are, as you can see on the screen, Christine E.M. Keller and Roseanne Prim. Unfortunately, Roseanne is not able to join us this evening. So what I'm going to do briefly is ask Christine to please unmute and share a little bit about why you are running and your background, and then we will move on from there.
Hi, good evening, everyone. As she said, my name is Christine Keller. I've been in Boston for about 4 years now, and prior to that, completed a PhD at Purdue University. I studied biochemical nutrition there and specialized in eating behavior and aging and gerontology. Since coming to Boston, I've had the honor of becoming the director of my church's food pantry. It's a medium-sized food pantry, and we serve about 180 households, or during the pandemic, as many as 210 households in a month. And a couple things I love about my community in Southie there is that we are an incredibly diverse group. We have about 7 different languages that are spoken of individuals that come to our pantry. And I'm very passionate about improving ways that we can connect with individuals from different cultures. Fourth Presbyterian is also very involved in the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization, which I know some of you are affiliated with. And that is an organization that primarily advocates and organizes for political agendas to improve the lives of those in Boston. So I'm mainly seeking to join the steering committee as a means to become more involved, and also to represent the different aspects of the importance of research in our work, political organizing, and also bringing together different communities through the food pantry. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the chat. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Christine. So we will be sharing out the election form. If you have any questions, please go ahead and drop them in the chat. But thank you to Christine for taking time tonight to share your experience and your background. And we will be opening the election form this evening, and we will keep it open through Friday evening. So it'll be open for about 48 hours. As I said, we'll drop the link into the chat, and then we will also email it out with the meeting recap. We'll try to make sure that everyone has a chance to vote before the end of the day on Friday, and we will announce the election results in an upcoming email. So thank you to everyone in advance for voting. So I am pleased this evening to be able to turn the mic over to folks from the Office of Food Access at the City of Boston. You heard from Catalina earlier, as well as Han, who's here to share an update on the work that they have been doing.
Hi, everyone. My name's Hagan. I'm from the Office of Food Access. Thanks for having me tonight. So today we're just going to go over high level about the Mayor's Food Access Agenda goals and just kind of the transition process and things that happened in from 2020 to 2021. I know a good number of you have already seen this before, so I'll just touch base on the high level points and then share some resources at the end. Great. Next. Great. So I just wanted to start by recognizing the work that the Equitable Boston Food Ecosystem Project did. I know there's some folks from that group on this call. So this group, for people who, this is the first time hearing the name of this group, the Equitable Boston Food Ecosystem Project, or EBFE, is a collaboration of residents and nonprofit representatives that conducted a food assessment for the Office of Food Access in 2020, in the latter part of the year. And the Office of Food Access used the findings from that assessment to update our agenda and really like create some goals to inform the work of the office moving forward. So after December, we updated the agenda, and then we've been meeting with the EBFE group every week on up till last week to think about ways to implement these goals and objectives. So thank you to everyone who was part of those calls, and those conversations were really generative and really helpful for us. And now with BFAC, we are hoping consolidating those efforts. So folks who are on those EBFE calls are hopefully joining the BFAC calls, and those EBFE meetings are no longer happening. And we're hoping to transition all of that work into the BFAC working groups moving forward. So I'm going to keep going. So the next couple of slides are just high levels about the goals of the Mayor's Food Access Agenda. So just to highlight, the agenda is completed, but needs to be reviewed and approved by the mayors, and we just are not sure about that timeline because of all the transition. But regardless of when things are going to be approved and published online, we are still going to move forward on these goals, and we have been doing that since the beginning of this year. So goal 1 is really about partnerships and making food insecurity a priority for partners who don't work directly in food. So it's about working with internal foodie partners and external groups as well. And then the next slide just shows quickly some BFAC priorities that the council is thinking about, and I know that we'll get into that later, so I won't spend too much time on that, but these are the ones that are connected to the mayor's goal that we just saw. And then goal 2 is about strengthening the food access network and sharing resources. And this is really just about providing coordination efforts, consolidating data, sharing best practices, and then really developing community leadership or supporting community leadership. The BFAC priority goals that I know this group will talk about later are on the next slide. Thinking about who's missing from the conversations, thinking about ways to convene the network, thinking about ways to support farmers, especially around Article 89. And then goal 3 is just a policy agenda and advocacy, and the BFAC priorities connecting to that are, so that's the next slide, are about advocating for state and federal level policies, and I listed some programs there, as well as supporting anti-hunger campaigns, the anti-hunger campaign on college campuses. Yeah, and then the next one is about building awareness and really trust and greater utilization of available resources. We just don't want any dollars from the table, and we just need to think about ways how to work with community members and community organizations about communication. And the BFAC priorities that we will talk about later tonight are on the next slide, and they're about directly linked to that goal, thinking about how to raise awareness, thinking about how to destigmatize food insecurity, thinking about a culturally relevant food guide for retailers to really reference. And then goal 5 is about, we're getting to the end, it's about making healthy and fresh food more affordable and accessible throughout Boston. And so it's really about accessibility. And the BFAC goal here will really be thinking about Article 89 which is on the next slide, and thinking about ways to support individuals who are interested in urban farming. And we really want to target neighborhoods with higher food insecurity. And finally, the last goal is about strengthening the emergency response program. So this goal was really out of the EBFE comments about just the need to have like a plan, especially during COVID, responding to COVID, and as well as like preparing for future challenges. And the community engagement element, community engagement is really a big element of this goal. And the next slide, the BFAC priority that folks will talk about, we will talk about is just thinking about how we can convene everyone who's involved in the food work right now to like build this like collaborative system to meet the needs that are in our communities. So that was just a really high level overview. I saw in the chat box know about Article 89. I can definitely send the link about that. Finally, resources. I'm going to pause here, so if anyone has any questions, definitely feel free to chat or to come off mute. But the first one, we are looking for partners who can provide act as host sites to provide free meals for youth 18 and under, and this is made possible through a partnership with the YMCA, and organizations can apply to become host sites for this summer, and you can submit your information to the form link there, and you can share those links as well. The second one is we can provide free flyers for organizations or individuals who are interested in sharing information. So information on SNAP or PBT or HIP or double food bugs, and those are all things that I think we are really excited to have help to share information about. So we'd love, if you're interested in sharing those, we can print them and send them out to you. If you don't know what those programs are, like definitely let us know, and like we can connect, and that can be a great place to start as well. Next, vaccinations. We're helping out with getting the word out for vaccines. And so if there are organization leads who are interested in receiving materials about vaccinations, please let us know about that as well. We'll send out these links after, but we are looking for organizations, not individuals, for this, because we can only give bulk orders. So we don't want someone to be stuck with just like so many vaccine related handouts, but we do want to get them in the hands of folks who are able to distribute them widely. And the last resource is we have this opportunity to work with DTA and UMass about SNAP outreach. And this is a program for organizations who want to become official DTA SNAP outreach partners. So these organizations can receive reimbursements for their outreach efforts. And to do that, you have to attend a meeting, a training, and then also contact the UMass representative. So I put their email on the slide, but if you have any questions about that, please let me know. That is for organizations and not individuals as well. Okay, so I'll pause there. Any questions so far or about these resources or about the goals? There'll be plenty of time to talk about the goals this meeting, but did want to pause for a second. Great. So my name's Hayan, and I'll chat my email on the slide. If you can go to the next slide, Megan. My email is there, but I'll enter it in the chat. And please let me know if you have questions. I do want to say last thing about the goals. We know that the goals cannot be moved just by like one group, and we really are looking for engagement with a wide range of organizations and individuals, and just always looking for ways to partner. I know that there are positions open on the working groups, and I don't know if Lauren and Annalise will talk about that later. But really encourage folks to keep an eye out for ways to get involved in those working groups, because we know that that will be essential to moving these objectives forward.
You hit the nail on the head, Hay, and we
Yes,
will
thank you.
definitely be discussing those openings a little bit later in the agenda. So I would encourage everyone as we move into the next section, and as you think about the conversation and the presentation that Hayan just shared, start to think about where you might want to engage with this work, because the work happens in the working groups, and we need folks there to help us get that work done. So we are shockingly very ahead of schedule. So that is really lovely. We are going to kick it into breakouts in a moment, and I'm going to turn the mic over to Catherine in just 1 second, also on the steering committee, to review the process. But a little bit of a late breaking update here is that I'm going to, once Catherine intros the breakout groups, I'm going to open all 6 rooms. We have 1 for each goal. We had planned on pre-assigning everyone, and you would have been a little bit complicated. Zoom is giving me the option to allow you to choose your room. So hopefully you will be able to choose a room that corresponds to the goal that most interests you. So please, as we move on to the next slide, think about the goals that Hayan just presented, and think about what resonates the most with you. And with that, I will turn it over to Catherine to explain how these breakout groups are going to work. And if for any reason the choosing your own room option doesn't work, I apologize in advance, and we will just auto assign everyone then, but fingers crossed.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to walk through what we're going to do tonight. So I think the presentation that Hayan just gave was a great intro, because it sort of sets the stage about what we want to focus on for this next year. So Hayan, those priorities and goals that she just outlined are kind of some of the things that are within the mayor's food access agenda, and that working group, what they are going to be focusing on. What we want to look at tonight is the goals that we've outlined, these 6 goals, and how we want to prioritize them, and what are the projects that are going to move these goals forward, and where those projects should live, what working groups that they should live in. Is there a working group that does not exist that should be created just to move something forward? Those are the sort of things that we want to identify and tease out, but we really want this to be an inclusive process, and we need for you all to weigh in here. So we're going to give a couple of different ways to do this. So as Lauren said, in a moment, we're going to break out into 6 different working groups, breakout groups, I should say, and each one is going to be assigned each one of these goals. So if you're in breakout group 1, you're going to be focusing on goal 1. As Lauren said, if you want to be moved, let her know. I think if you can stay in the group and just really focus in on what that goal is with that group, that would be great. Because we're going to also give an opportunity for you each to fill out a form and give feedback on each one of these goals as well. So the form that I put into the chat, that's going to be used for both the breakout rooms and for individual feedback after the meeting, and we can kind of circle back when we're done. But essentially, you're going to ask yourselves a couple of questions about each of these goals. You're going to ask, is this a goal? Is this a high, medium, and low priority? I think that's going to be hard, because you're going to be talking about one thing, and you're probably going to want to say that this is a high priority because that's the thing you're focused on. But if you can think about the context of where we are here in this climate with COVID, this being a fairly young council, and what we might want to accomplish and focus in on in the next year, think about all of those things as you're thinking about the priority, low, medium, or high. Then you're going to ask, what would advance this goal? What's the kind of project? Is it, a goal around, communication, or I'm sorry, the goal around, ensuring food access issues are prioritized within the community? What are the goals that are going to help move that forward, or projects that are going to move that forward? So that's the sort of thing that we're hoping you guys can tease out, just focusing on one goal. And then if you do identify a project or a goal, where should that live? Should it live in the mayor's access food, um, working group? Should it live in the policy and advocacy working group? So just try to figure out where you think it could live, because I think as steering committee members, we're trying to, prioritize these things, but also understand like where they can live, and where, things can be advanced. So with that, those are the questions on the form. Those questions are written out, so you don't have to remember. We'll also send you, I'll drop the link to the list of the goals as well in the chat, so you have that, and you can kind of reference and go back and forth. And if there are any questions, please feel free to ping myself or any one of the steering committee members, and we can ask, questions. What it would be helpful is if you assign a note taker and have one person fill out the form for the group while you're in the breakout session, and then we'll come back and one person from each group will do a quick report out, and we'll do another exercise to see if we can prioritize some of these, and then again we'll send out the form again for people. If you want to just fill it out individually, you'll have that opportunity. So hopefully that works and that was clear.
Awesome. Thank you, Catherine. Really quickly before we open the breakout groups, there is a question which Annalise is working to try and address in the chat. And while she does that, Elena, who is our Spanish interpreter, just checking in to see if you have folks that have joined you on the channel, because it would be helpful to know where we need to put you for a breakout group. Oh, okay. Well, thank you, Zoom. It's just they hide all the important information. And I unfortunately can't see much of anything because I've got my screen shared. So once we get into the breakouts, I will try to determine that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and open up the breakout rooms. Thank you, Catherine, for sharing that. Just to answer a couple questions before we do this. No, we don't get to video record the breakouts. So there will be a steering committee member in each room. As Catherine said, someone should note take and fill out the form on behalf of the group. If someone is interested in audio recording from their phone, you can do that, but you do require the consent of everyone in the room to do so, because that is not something that have the capabilities to do from the Zoom features. So again, choose the breakout room that is of most interest to you. I'm going to open them all for 30 minutes. So we'll pull everyone back automatically in 30 minutes to do recaps from each room before we move on to the next section of the agenda for tonight's meeting. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Hopefully everyone had good conversations within your breakout groups. And hopefully everyone provided your note takers and form fillers with enough content to complete said forms. But we do want to take a few minutes, since we all could only join one group. We did want to take a couple minutes, just maybe a minute or two per group, to ask folks to report out on the top themes from theirs. So I'm going to call on Megan from the steering committee, or whomever in your group indicated that they would report back.
It was me. I'll share a couple of things, and then if people from my group want to add anything, feel free to. So we talked about working with city agencies, trying to align goals, and also we had Melissa from H Strong, and she shared some successes that they've had advocating for H Strong initiatives with other city agencies. And in that same vein, trying to have a way to collect best practices for work that's going on within this goal. And someone also mentioned that, the goal talked a lot about providing food to youth, but that we should make sure that throughout there's also a focus on older adults, and that there's also a focus on undocumented populations as well. Does anyone from the group want to add anything?
Megan, I just wanted to follow up and say, sorry, just wanted to follow up and say, just dealing with the sort of the realities and the constraints of like other city agencies when considering how we're approaching them for partnership and what we're asking for from them. Just being mindful of that. I guess that goes for programs. Just weighing that into how we are thinking about our collaborations with city agencies. Thanks, Megan.
Thanks, Josh.
Okay, thank you. Group 2, Joy, do you want to go ahead, or whomever from your group on goal number 2?
Yes, I believe Megan's going to share out.
Yeah, I have the notes. A lot of time was spent talking about the Article 89 and farmers in Boston, and thinking about how maybe it's not BFAC's role to enlist new farmers in Boston, but connecting existing farmers with the resources that exist already and finding out what resources they may still need help with. And then we also talked, and I think because of that, the goal ended up being like medium to high priority, and also talked a lot about farmers markets and connecting farmers with Boston farmers markets and figuring out, that there are a lot of challenges to that and figuring out ways to support them further. And that was what we spent most of the conversation around. I'm not sure if there's anything else, Joy, that you can think of.
Yeah, there was also comments around how immigrant communities and getting food access to those communities need to be a high priority, how there may be that many immigrant communities are not going to farmers markets or different things. So there was the suggestion of identifying where are immigrant communities going to get food and where are people going to get food, whether it's corner stores or wherever, to be able to identify how we can get the right food into those locations. And I think that was mostly it.
Great, thank you, Group 2. I will report out on behalf of Group 3, and we had a really interesting conversation just about, despite the prioritization here from the agenda that came from the city around federal and state programs, just the fact that there are a wide variety of coalitions and groups that are also working on those issues, and that we are in a unique position as BFAC to really work at the municipal policy advocacy level primarily. Not to say that we wouldn't advocate on behalf of state and federal policies, but maybe that we would prioritize municipal policy first, and then sort of use the work of the other coalitions to share with the broader BFAC on how folks can advocate for those state and federal policies. Specifically at the city level, the first thing that sort of rose to the top of the conversation, as we are in a mayoral race now, or likely to be, we're looking at potentially trying to host a candidate forum to identify where the candidates sit on issues of food access. We also talked about a few other specific projects, sort of looking at how the city is addressing data and the mapping of resources, as well as the prioritization of transit in development to ensure that food access is available to folks. Does anyone else from our group want to share anything additional that I might have missed? Okay, Catherine, I'm going to turn it over to group 4.
Right, thank you. And Kristen from my group is going to report out.
Yes, thank you, Catherine. So our group, through some conversation, I overall identified this goal as high. We talked about it's very high for the LGBTQ community, high in terms of confusion around COVID checks, making people ineligible for SNAP in one instance and eligible in the other. And then we talked a little bit about getting the word out for HIP. And that rose to the top. I think we see it fitting into the community outreach engagement education group. And there's a lot of talk about how we can work with Catalina at the mayor's office to figure out the best way to disseminate this information to residents. Like she mentioned, is it WhatsApp, is it mail? And that will really change community to community. So how can we be a voice to her and her team there? And anyone in my group can feel free to add to that.
I feel like you covered it. I think the only thing I would add is that there was also a conversation about resources within the community and from specific organizations and how to sort of disseminate those as well as the cities.
Perfect. Thanks, Catherine.
Great. Sorry, my screen is doing something a little bit funny, so I'm just going to go ahead and stop sharing for now. So group 5, that was
me. Okay, so we did a little review of the EBFE timeline and backstory. There was a question about which of the action items and specific things from the spreadsheet would be implemented. I don't know, hoping to find out soon. And other than that, so A, and then B, we're here to do it. So that's why we're here. So we talked a lot about land access and people's ability to grow their own food. Not really pertaining to Article 89, maybe as a shoot off to Article 89. We didn't really get into all that because none of us really are familiar enough with it to offer pros and cons or discuss barriers, other than the question was asked, you know, why not find out the barriers first, you know, and then work backwards from that as part of the agenda. And I know that we're sort of at the beginning of trying to do that, but that was something that was raised. But in our discussion about Article 89, we did say, you know, what does this mean? And essentially, Diane had the great point. It sounds like a sort of like a mini right to farm almost. You know, like states like North Carolina, you know, right to farm laws, you know, farming and agricultural production almost sort of takes precedence over any other kind of land use in a way. And there's a lot of other legal protections. But how can we let people know about that? How can we advertise that and let them know not only that Boston is a right to farm community or something like that, you know, maybe not exactly legal name, but and what does that mean for them? And you know, we're thinking a lot about language and how to maintain a strictly, you know, clearly anti-racist, equity-focused perspective lens throughout the entire thing, and really begin to support sovereignty for people. You know, how do we give people sovereignty in that way without really you know what I mean? Like land access. And the barriers are multitudinous, and there are 100 ways that it could be easier for people to get land from the city, like through the grassroots program or through you know, the resources on the page about Article 89. But we're concerned that equity has not been or won't be sort of sown throughout this legislation and this language. Specifically, you know, it would be great, yeah, to make getting land and gardens easier for people, but we would need to also include in that language about rent protection and anti-gentrification stuff, and, you know, how to, you know, really mean it and not just raise property value. Anyone else from my group, please chime in. I'm not good at this.
Annalise, this is Diana. I think you did an excellent job capturing the discussion. And because I think that the challenge is, again, the knowing the want and the desire that everybody has to want to support urban agriculture, but acknowledging like Boston, Massachusetts in general isn't going to grow itself out of food insecurity. You know, so that's a challenge. But I would definitely say that everybody agreed it's a high priority to focus on that, you know, self-agency, that, you know, making sure, as Annalise said, that people have the knowledge and the information. If you, you know, we weren't sure, you know, could you qualify it as a right to farming community? We don't know, because we don't know the technicalities of that. But if it's even something close, what does that mean for the community? In terms of, you know, self-agency, the ability to feed oneself, their family, their community, and, you know, economic opportunity. So it was a really good discussion. And, you know, given the fact that we weren't really sure what it meant, you know, landing on, well, you got to talk to community to find out what the barriers are, and then provide supports around that. So good conversation and great recap, Annalise.
Awesome. Thank you, Group 5. Okay, so Group 6, Nicole, not sure who's reporting out from your group, but take it away.
Jen from our group will be doing our report out.
So our conversation was around COVID, and I forget what the specific thing was. But we as a group, we first started just talking about the need for better coordination among organizations, and some people in the group were just talking about many different organizations crossing one another in a neighborhood and potentially serving some of the same people, or just the need for how we can coordinate better. But where we spent the majority of our time talking about was the need, this we believe would go to the policy group, is the need for advocacy for the state to open up their offices so people can be in person for SNAP applications and for PEBT cards or EBT cards, knowing that the moratorium is going to come off here pretty soon for rent, and evictions are going to start going up soon. There's a lot of hard decisions people are making right now between paying for their home or paying for food. And so one of the most stable forms that you can get to help provide food is getting enrolled with SNAP for those who are eligible. And sometimes folks need to have the in-person option, and that's been closed down since the pandemic began. And so what is the advocacy that we could do as a group with the governor's office, with the state of Massachusetts, to start demanding that those offices get back open? Monday, they have opened up capacity on restaurants. I think venues can now have up to 500 people at them. So if we're able to do that, then we sure as hell should be able to open up our government offices for people to be able to access the services they need.
And we think this is urgent, like we need to do this now. That's all I've got.
Yeah, cool. Thank you, Jen. I'm going to
Mhm.
turn it to Catherine as well for a little extra step in our breakout process.
Thank you. Can you see my screen, everyone? All right, I'm gonna drop in just as one last exercise to sort of see if we can kind of prioritize some of these goals and kind of tease out some of the themes that we really want to hone into this year within the working groups. So I am going to do a word cloud. I'm dropping in the link. So if everyone can kind of just drop in, I think you can put in about 3 options, and you can either do goal 1, 2, or 3, or a specific word like communication, or, you know, I don't know what it is, open equity, whatever it may be. But just put in the word and as it relates to one of these 6 goals, and we'll see what we've come up with.
I've never seen this. This is awesome.
Yeah, shouts out to Marcos, our steering committee member who is not with us this evening, who gave this to us. It's a co-constructive word cloud.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I will save this for everyone, and we'll send it around. But obviously, equity is a priority. If I can, that's kind of slapping us in the face. But yeah, I think that this has been really helpful. If you were, you know, a note taker for each one of the groups, make sure that you did submit that on behalf of each of one of your breakout groups onto the form. We dropped the form into the chat, so we really do want to encourage individual participation and feedback on where these goals should live and how they should be prioritized. So please do that. We want to, we'll be disseminating that information. We can send the form around, I guess, again tomorrow morning. But thank you for everyone's participation this evening. It's very helpful.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to take control back of the screen sharing. Thankfully, my screen seems to want to work again, so that's good timing for everybody. So we are going to do probably for about 15 minutes, we're just going to run through some quick updates from the working group. So everything that you just heard, from the priorities from OFA down to the working group conversations about how we see this work move forward, within BFAC and what the projects look like and where the work should live. Well, the bulk of the work lives in the working groups. We at the steering committee level are the administrative arm that provides the infrastructure and the space for these meetings, the tools and the resources, but the working groups are really where the work gets done, and that's where we need energy. So I would love to, I'm gonna go ahead and actually I'll probably stop sharing just so we can see the folks that are speaking. But could we, Sarah, can I ask you to unmute quickly and share some of the work that's happening at the Policy and Advocacy Group?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Manigo. Thank you so much for everything that you're doing to help improve food security in the Boston area. We appreciate your joining us this evening. The Policy and Advocacy Working Group has met twice since I joined in December. We have a terrific core group of members representing food system nonprofits and the community, and we're grateful for their time and talent. In our working group meetings, we've opened dialogue about the policy and advocacy initiatives of several of our members' organizations, which has led to helpful discussion, opportunity for capacity building, and identification of potential synergies that can lend to shared resources and support. Our working group members have diverse food system interest areas that are all important components of the Office of Food Access's implementation plan. We're currently monitoring legislation and current area nonprofit organization initiatives to identify ways to support this implementation plan through policy and advocacy. Catalina and Hyen, Director and Deputy Director of the Mayor's Office of Food Access, joined us in one of our meetings to discuss resources and benefit access. They have been extremely helpful to our group, and we thank them for their continued support. Jennifer Valenzuela also joined us to briefly discuss the report recently published by EBFE and its recommendations. Outstanding job on that. Many thanks to Jen and the other members of EBFE, and Simka Horwitz, co-director of the Massachusetts Farm to School, shared her insights on the Boston Good Food Purchasing Program with the working group. Thank you, Simka. That was absolutely outstanding as well. So in terms of policy, last week, BFAC signed the Massachusetts Food System Collaborative 2021 legislative white paper to demonstrate its support for key food system bills that will be voted on in the 2021-2022 legislative session. And over the last month, we've taken initiative to support over 16 legislative actions. These include acts supporting the Commonwealth's food system, food donation, school meals, SNAP access, campus student food security, farmer sustainability, the establishment of a farm to school grant program, farmland protection and viability, agricultural healthy incentives, okay, I can speak tonight, equity in agriculture, and others. So if you're interested in joining us, our next meeting will be on March 10th from 6 to 7 p.m. And please feel free to send me an email if you have any questions or if you would like to share anything with the working group.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. Joy, can we ask you to speak on behalf of Community Outreach, Engagement, and Education?
Hi there. Thank you, everyone. Our Community Outreach, Engagement, and Education Committee has met once this year. Our last meeting was on February 16th. And one of the things that we were able to do is to identify some of the priorities for the year. Those are obviously subject to change via our conversation tonight, but some of those were expanding the community engagement and involvement across BFAC public meetings and working group meetings to ensure community voices are heard and included in decision-making processes. Two was expanding access to urban agriculture, where there was education, engagement, and collaboration with the Policy and Advocacy Committee, and expanding SNAP and other programs. I think that there, for this week or for this year, some of the desired outcomes is to be able to implement a communications strategy. And so over the next month, we are diving deep, meeting weekly to start developing the core of that strategy, and it will be a BFAC wide communications strategy and plan. So if you are interested in that, we will, I am sending out a doodle, and I can put the link in the chat. The availability is going to be during the day, Mondays or Wednesdays, sometime during the day. So it will be based upon our group availability. Some of the other things that we have been identifying is some of the community groups that exist in the area where there are gaps with engagement for community members, and we'll begin visiting a lot of those groups in the coming month. And so letting them know about BFAC and letting them know about our working group committees. And then we also have a chair opening for our committee, and we do welcome anyone who is interested in communications and engagement and thinking through some of the details of how we can keep the community engaged and vibrant around these topics. Definitely join us for our next full meeting, which will be Tuesday, March 16th from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. If you had any other questions about like what we're doing, how we're doing it, how you can get involved, we'd love to have you. I'll pop my email in the chat, and I look forward to seeing some of you there.
Awesome. Thanks, Joy. Paul and Claire, who represent the fundraising group, not sure which one of you wants to unmute, but please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk for us tonight. So I'm Paul Garabedian. I'm the co-chair of the fundraising working group alongside Claire Sikander. So we're coming up on 1 full year of being a working group. And so we've met just about every month since we formed. And we do have a small loyal group that's stuck with us every step of the way as we sort of, venture on and begin to be able to start to fundraise for BFAC. So we presented to the steering committee last week, and we are going to be spearheading the council's registration as a nonprofit. And then from there, looking into either seeking out fiscal sponsorship or becoming certified 501c3 so that we can then begin to do the fundraising that we would like to. And yeah, so like I said, we do have a small group of folks, and we're going to continue to start to get busy here, as we register, and then also beginning to compile potential donor lists and create collateral and get ready to do some serious outreach. So if you have any interest in that, definitely either sit in on one of our meetings or get involved with us long term. So our next meeting will be March 18th from 5:30 to 6:30, and yeah, I'll put my email in the chat there. But yeah, we would love to have you. So please join us. I'm not sure if Claire, you want to say anything else?
I think that was great, Paul. I would add that even if you are unable to join a working group meeting or you don't want to attend many, we would love to see you at one, and we would love your thoughts on fiscal sponsorship, particularly if you have worked with one before, or if you have established a relationship with one, or even if you just know of one or of an organization that offers fiscal sponsorship services. Come to our meeting or just shoot one of us, me or Paul, an email. We're diving into it, like Paul said, and we would love to learn all that we can. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you both. So the last thing that we wanted to highlight is the Mayor's Food Access Agenda Working Group. And Han, I want to give you a chance to weigh in too, but I think the first thing I want to say is I want to echo what Joy mentioned, which is that we have an opening for a working group chair in her working group, and we also need someone to run to be the working group co-chair opposite Han. The way that the Mayor's Food Access Agenda Working Group has been planned is that there would be representation from both OFA and the community. And so we would encourage anyone that has the time and the energy to really help us move this work forward to please reach out to us at the Boston Food Access Council at gmail.com so that we can hold an election to actually put someone in the seat opposite Han, so that all of the things that everyone has been talking about here can really continue to move forward. Han, I don't know if you have anything that you wanted to add as well from your perspective.
No, that was great. Thank you. And just want to really encourage folks to apply. Would love to work with someone directly to move move the mayor's food access agenda goals forward. And I think just a point of clarity, the projects that we'll work on are from the mayor's food access agenda, which haven't been published yet, but we went over tonight. And it'll be those goals and objectives that aren't really organized into those other buckets, other working groups. So we have some policy ones on there, but the policy working group, I feel like will own it. But there are other goals that and opportunities for folks to work on food access in many different ways. So really hoping to work with folks, and please reach out if you have any questions.
Awesome, thanks. I want to take a moment before we turn to the next item in the agenda just to see if there are any questions from the audience for working group leads.
Lauren, are there any limits or like eligibility requirements for participation on any of the working groups?
There are not. I think the one thing that we know is that we want to make sure it's people that are not also on the steering committee, because it is a pretty big administrative lift to handle both. So we had steering committee members do interim roles, and then the goal has been to elect community members or organizational representatives to those chair seats. I don't want to like bite my tongue, but nothing is coming to my mind that would restrict.
Gotcha. Yeah, totally understand. Thank you.
Good question though. Okay, well, we do have 3 groups that are here to present this evening. So with that, I would love to turn the mic over to Hannah from the Food is Medicine Massachusetts Coalition. And we will hear from these 3 groups. We have about 15 minutes total. So we're asking each group to sort of speak for a few minutes, and then we'll have some time for Q&A as well.
All right, thank you. So hi everyone, my name is Hannah Sobel, and I'm the Food and Health Policy Program Manager at Community Servings in Jamaica Plain. So together with the Center for Health Law and Policy Innovation at Harvard Law School, we co-lead Food is Medicine Massachusetts, or FIMA. We're a statewide coalition of over 80 organizations in the state that work to create a healthcare system that recognizes and responds to that critical relationship between health and food. So as a coalition, we work to improve our food and healthcare systems and to enhance the connection between them. We released the Massachusetts Food is Medicine State Plan in June of 2019. And now our coalition works to implement its recommendations and vision. So I'm here tonight to share 2 updates on our advocacy efforts. A bill in the Massachusetts legislature and an upcoming FIMA info session for community members. So next slide, please. So on this very busy slide is some information that we are excited to share that Senator Julian Cyr and Representative Denise Garlick have reintroduced an act relative to establishing a food and health pilot program. So this legislation would require Mass Health to establish a food and health pilot program to demonstrate the impact of offering a suite of nutrition services for Mass Health enrollees diagnosed with specific health conditions and food insecurity. This pilot program would require a healthcare facility to provide referrals to 3 types of these nutrition services: a medically tailored meal program, medically tailored grocery program, and a nutritious food referral program, something like a produce prescription. So to be eligible for the pilot, Mass Health enrollees must be food insecure and diagnosed with at least 1 diet-related health condition. And based on their illness profile, the participants in the pilot will receive one of those 3 services for at least 16 weeks. So the three goals of the pilot are to evaluate the impact of offering this suite of nutrition services on healthcare utilization and costs, expand access to these food as medicine interventions across Massachusetts, and enhance the ability of our healthcare system to provide appropriate nutrition services based on patient need. For more information about these bills, please visit the FIMA website, is foodasmedicinema.org, where you can find links to the bill text and a one-pager about the legislation as well. And to support the bill, we encourage all of you to reach out to your legislators about the importance of this legislation. And you can also reach out to me to get on the FIMA mailing list, where we will share opportunities for support and engagement. Next slide, please. So related to advocacy, but also going a little bit beyond that, FIMA has been working on being more inclusive for community members, meaning people who are experiencing chronic disease and food insecurity directly, to be involved with our coalition and our advocacy efforts. Back when we were working on the state plan, we interviewed recipients of food as medicine services, and their voices really informed the recommendations in the plan. So now we're hoping to include those voices a little bit more in our coalition as well. So one start to this is that we're going to be hosting a community meeting and FIMA information session. And so the goals of the session are to reach a common understanding on what is food as medicine, introduce what FIMA does, and give some examples of how people can participate in advocacy. We actually do recently have a date set. It's March 24th, and it'll be held via Zoom, but participants can also call in over the phone. And this will be one of what we're hoping is many community meetings like this. And so I just want to stress that this is for people from communities who have a high prevalence of chronic disease associated with food insecurity. That is the type of communities that we're trying to engage in this work. Next slide. Okay, so that's it. Thank you so much. Please visit our website to learn more about the pilot legislation. And for more information about the FIMA community information session, you can email me at hsobel@servings.org. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Hannah. And now I would like to see if there's any questions in the chat, which is hard for me to see at the moment, but doesn't look like there are at the moment. So we can always turn the mic back over if any questions pop up during the next presentation. But to keep things moving and be mindful of everyone's time, I'd like to turn it over to Simca to talk about the good food purchasing policy.
Hi, thanks so much. So my name is Simca Horwitz, and I'm the co-director of an organization called Massachusetts Farm to School, and also serving as a kind of interim coordinator of something called the Boston Good Food Purchasing Coalition. And for those of you who are not familiar with what the Good Food Purchasing Policy is, just give a little bit of background. And this is a policy that the city adopted in the spring of 2019. And it's really about transforming the way that public institutions purchase food. And as it says here, by creating a transparent and equitable food system built on 5 core values. And those values are local economies, health, a valued workforce, animal welfare, and environmental sustainability. Next slide. And so this is just a little bit more about the value category. So it's really about thinking how we invest public dollars to advance a more just food system, and not looking just at local food, which is something I think we've certainly talked about within this group, but really looking at these other values as well. And in Boston, as I said, the policy was passed in 2019. Next slide. mostly under really strong leadership from City Councilor Michelle Wu, and a coalition that came together to actually support the adoption of the policy by the city. It passed very quickly. So if you didn't actually kind of hear about it, even though you're maybe involved in sort of the food world in Boston, it sort of passed so quickly that there actually wasn't a lot of time that was spent on kind of the typical like advocacy and organizing that have been present in many other communities that have adopted this kind of policy. And there are about 20 cities around the country that have a similar policy on the books. One of the things that's really exciting about the policy here in Boston, on this next slide, is that we were able to put in really strong language around transparency, the process by which people can learn about how the city is doing food purchasing in the impacted agencies. So the biggest one that's impacted by this policy is the Boston Public Schools, that serves around $18 million worth of food, or does about $18 million worth of purchasing each year, but also Age Strong, which is providing elder meals, and some other agencies in the city that are similarly doing food purchasing. And there was also some really specific language around promoting racial equity, which was an exciting development that's not something that's present necessarily in some of the other cities that have adopted this policy. So really great to have it kind of on the books. And now we're sort of shifting into this phase of implementation. So typically what happens first is that the city actually does a kind of baseline assessment of what the purchasing looks like. That's something that our coalition is advocating to really kind of get off the ground. And so that we can understand what our purchasing currently looks like and really set some goals moving forward. So we do have this coalition that meets monthly. Our next meeting, next slide. Our next meeting is going to be March 18th. And it's really open for anyone to get involved. There's a lot of folks who are involved with BFAC who are already engaged. So thank you for all of you, but we're really excited to expand the coalition, really think about having greater involvement from people who are most impacted by the policy itself. So that includes families in Boston Public Schools, people who are food producers themselves, students, and so really looking to expand the coalition. So just want to kind of extend an invite for people who are interested in learning more. You're welcome to contact me directly. I'm happy to share some of the kind of background info, and then of course you're welcome to attend one of the coalition meetings. And yeah, I think I'll end it there, and if there's time for questions, happy to answer.
Awesome. Thank you, Simca. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I am going to turn the mic to Cooking Matters to make sure that we get everything in for this evening. And this way, if we capture any questions that are not answered, we can always follow up via email as well.
Thanks, Lauren. Thanks everyone for sharing this space with me tonight. I'm Kristen from Cooking Matters, and I'm here tonight to share some programmatic work that we can offer you and your agencies across the state. So Cooking Matters, we focus on food skills education, so it goes beyond what you might think of nutrition education, also cooking, shopping, and a focus on feeding kids who are 0 to 5, so from pregnancy through 5 years old. We are funded by the DTA and are an arm of SNAP Ed, so we can work throughout the state and have funding to do so. So I'm going to share a little bit more about our program on the next slide. We've been in Massachusetts since 1993, obviously in person, and now, just like the rest of our lives, we are offering programs on Zoom, and I'm really working on a pilot for some phone programs too, to address the issue of no and low internet across the state and general Zoom fatigue among parents. So we can offer these 30 and 60-minute programs to your agencies, especially if you serve parents and caregivers, and they can be grandparents as well. Any non-traditional caregiver is 100% welcome. We offer all languages. We have Spanish-speaking staff, and then we are happy to pay for interpreters in other languages. Our small food access piece that we can contribute to would be delivering groceries for the cooking classes. And if that doesn't work for your agency, then we can give physical $10 gift cards that your individuals can purchase themselves or use for another purpose. That's fine too. Next slide. So I did mention we focus on parents and caregivers, and it's really addressing the needs we saw in national listening sessions, which Massachusetts was involved, but caregivers are strapped for time, they're strapped for money, and they are having trouble with having picky eaters. So in the last 2 years, we've worked to design these sessions. They were co-created with a group of caregivers across the nation, and some of the topics we're trying to tackle on Zoom when we'd rather be together in person, but we can offer any of these. Next slide. So I'm happy to talk with you by phone or email, see if we can work together. I think something, if you take a look at our website, our recipes have a long way to go in cultural relevance, for example, and something I'm also piloting is bringing on a community champion that we can compensate onto the Zoom calls. And because we're a statewide program and not in every community, that can help ground the program within each community. If you don't have time and you don't want to offer a specific Zoom session for your folks, then we offer free Facebook Lives every Thursday at 2 in Spanish and English. And then we have some open sessions throughout the state that people can register on their own through Eventbrite. I also have money to print if you want me to help print some of these for your clients. And I'm just kind of happy to talk about what your needs are in regards to parents and caregivers and food skills education in Boston and beyond. So let's connect, and thanks for sharing the space.
Awesome. Thank you, Kristen. So I don't see any questions in the chat for our presenters, so I'm just going to run through some next steps and action items for everybody, but please keep dropping anything into the chat. We've got a couple more minutes here. So this slide is really just to review the things that we hope you all will consider doing to stay engaged and participate within BFAC. Many of these have been dropped through the chat throughout the meeting, but I will just sort of plug them again here. One, if you have not, please go ahead and make sure that you fill out the attendance form for the meeting this evening. And then, as we mentioned, we will be sending around the link to vote for our steering committee opening. So we can drop it in the chat now, so you can all go vote right this minute. But we can also, we will also be emailing it around tomorrow morning, along with the meeting recap for folks to vote there. As we've mentioned, working groups are where the work happens. So we do have a working group sign-up form that will get you onto the distribution list for each of the individual working groups. You are welcome to join multiple, but you decide what level of commitment and capacity you have. Most of them meet once a month. And again, I will just sort of remind everyone as well that we are still looking for folks to step forward and consider running for the chair or co-chair positions of both the Community Outreach Engagement and Education Group, as well as the Mayor's Food Access Agenda Working Group. We are at least a little bit active on social media. We have a new Facebook page. We have previously we had a Facebook group, but we are trying to modernize a tiny bit. So we're moving it over to a page. So if you're part of the group, join the page, follow the page, and stay engaged with us there. We also have a new Twitter account and Instagram account. We have a Slack workspace, which is a really great place for people to share information that they want to get out into the community and to the organizations and individuals that are part of BFAC. And then to be a general member and just be on our mailing list so that you are aware of all of our working groups, all of our meetings and so on, that link is there. And then lastly, I will plug the fact that we have quarterly public meetings like this one this evening. They exist on the first Wednesday of March, June, September, and December. So the next one is June 2nd, also 6 to 8 p.m. I think it's safe to say that we can assume that will not be an in-person meeting. So we are planning that to be a Zoom. And that is everything that I had to share. So I just want to call out Diane's question in the chat to the presenters, which is what are some of the strategies that you're implementing to ensure equitable engagement of those with lived expertise? How will their experiences be valued and their intellectual property protected? Anyone that wants to unmute and share, please go ahead.
Thank you for that question, Diane. The intellectual properties piece, I think that's something that we'll have to look into more deeply. To be able to protect the community. But one of the things that we are doing, we've already identified, and I think you've been a part of these conversations, identifying different community groups that are already that are in communities with people of lived experience. And so we have identified at least 12, and we'll begin to start making presentations to those groups and making sure that they are not only aware, but inviting an engagement and in leadership in the working groups and on the steering committees. It still is kind of a working process. And one of the ways that we can get that process rolling even faster is that if we have more people engaged in our working groups, helping to take on and sharing some of the tasks that that are on our plate and in our hands. So I will invite you to come back to our meetings if you do have the time, and to also invite some other people within your sphere that can help around strategizing around those topics. Thank you.
I would second Joy about wanting to learn more about the intellectual property, so I'll definitely look into that. I think our journey is not perfect, and we do co-creation when creating new materials, and people are compensated for their time, but we really don't have a good power sharing model or a way to, like a leadership path. So we are engaging, we're asking for feedback, we're co-creating, but we have a lot to do in this area. And I will second that being funded by a federal agency also has limitations that don't feel good when you hear a solution and you can't act on it because of funding. It's not, it's not right to sort of take that information from the community. So things I think about and don't have the answers to.
Apologies for switching the slide in the middle of you speaking, Kristen. That was like a very energetic cursor there. I want to be mindful of everyone's time. So thank you everybody for your participation this evening. We know 2 hours on a weeknight is a lot for everybody, but we would love to see you all in our upcoming working group meetings and on our social media channels and throughout all the different ways that we now get to communicate with each other virtually, and maybe one day back in person again. But until then, thank you and have a good night.